So I have been a county court judge now for over 18 months. I'm the only candidate with judicial experience. Prior to taking the bench, I was an attorney here in the Mahoning Valley for over 18 years, practicing law in the very courts in which I currently sit, the municipal and county court level. I have experience as an acting prosecutor, as a public defender, court-appointed counsel. I've handled voluminous amounts of cases that give me the experience necessary to be able to understand what types of cases are coming before my court, be able to understand them and process them quickly.
Well, as you know, I've been an attorney for the last 15 years representing injured workers, primarily in the Mahoning Valley, but I've also done work in the county courts, I've done work in the domestic court, I've done work in the probate court, and throughout this community. I was in the Senate for 10 years, so that gives me a unique perspective on not only fighting for people as their lawyer when dealing with the law, but also writing the laws down in Columbus. And as a judge, it's your job to follow the law and give people just results. And so I think that gives me those unique qualifications in order to do well as a judge. Well, I think back as a legislator, I voted to consolidate the Youngstown Muni courts. And so that was a tough decision, but the numbers showed that they didn't need 3 judges in the municipal court. And so I made that decision. I think it was in 12 or 13 when I voted for that bill in order to consolidate those courts. I tried to track down the bar, because if you remember, the Supreme Court gave the Mahoning County Bar money to do the study. And I believe, when my recollection from 7-8 years ago when I was down there, I believe that they made the recommendation that a county-wide system with the muni courts and the county courts mixed together was the most efficient. But I also believe that in that finding it said that the county courts were very efficient because more people were living in the outer areas, and not only that, but more crimes were being committed there because of the stores and all the roads and all the. So I think that they kind of made a finding that the county courts were efficient, but the most efficient way is to do a county-wide court system. With that being said, it's not my decision anymore. I mean, I'm not in the legislature. The legislature makes a decision about court consolidations, and an 8 or 9 or 10-year-old study might not be up to date. I'm not saying waste a bunch of money doing a study, but tweak the study and figure out what's the best way to do it. And I don't have any opposition to doing that. Obviously, I've already voted for a consolidation in the past.
So the first thing the public needs to know is that our county courts do operate very, very efficiently and with a minimal amount of staff. That said, our job as public officials obviously is to make sure that we're always looking for new and different ways to be able to save the county and the state money. One of the holdups, I think, with all of this is, number one, the legislature has formed these 4 courts. It did so back in the mid-90s. And they would be the ones that would ultimately have to rewrite legislation to change it or reduce it down to 3 or 2. What would go into that thinking in doing that? Well, we'd have to talk to all of the judges to make sure that we're able to effectively handle the caseload with say, 3 judges versus 4. We would have to look at the geographic proximity of all the courts to make sure that people in certain geographic portions of the county are not being given a heavier burden to have to travel to different courts. We also have leases that each of our county courts now are into, and so those leases would have to be altered or potentially broken, and so our county commissioners are going to have to be involved, our prosecutors are going to have to be involved. So it's going to take a team effort to look at this, determine if it's effective, and then to implement it. So one of the things that COVID has taught us is that remote court can happen. And so I think that we can become more efficient and more effective by implementing remote technology more often. I've really enjoyed working with our sheriff in determining which prisoners need transported out and which ones don't. We're now able to use that WebEx technology or remote technology to be able to arraign defendants from the jail. It saves our county a lot of money. In terms of efficiency and moving quicker, With the civil pretrials, it's interesting. We have attorneys that come in from Cleveland, from Toledo, from Youngstown. So for them to be able to appear at those hearings remotely, it saves them time. Oftentimes they'll go to a court hearing at 9 a.m. and they'll call our court and say, "Hey, I'm running late. I got held up at common police court," and so we then start getting behind. So remote technology is going to enable us to become more efficient.
Well, I think you can utilize common staff so you don't have people doing the same thing in different places. I think with technology now you could really do more with less workers, which means less money, which means less expenses. I think at the end of the day it's about efficiency, but you also got to remember that there's a court system there to serve the public, and so there has to be a balance of service to the public and efficiency to the taxpayers, and that's the kind of balance that I'll bring as a judge. So it's one of those things where you look at the numbers, you look at the efficiency, you look at the service, you make a recommendation to the legislature. I mean, if the locals make the recommendation to the legislature, all the times that I've seen that happen down in Columbus, maybe only 2 times out of 100 it hasn't happened. When the local legislators bring a plan down to Columbus that only affects that specific locality, then of course the other ones look at each other and go, well, if Senator so-and-so wants it and he's from that area, then let's go for it. But I think that there needs to be some up-to-date numbers, because utilizing and looking at those numbers from 10 years ago might not necessarily be up to date. Okay. Again, I mean, the only way to change that would be to do it through legislation in Columbus. For me, I primarily do workers' comp here and plan on continuing it if I'm successful in this election. But if the legislature says that's not appropriate, then we make the change. If having more full-time judges saves money, then that would be a factor. But I'm not sure that it does. I think that the system, I've worked a lot in the county courts. All of the judges that I've been in front of, you don't know what they do in their civil practice. I mean, it's a misdemeanor court dealing with primarily criminal matters. So you can't do criminal matters, of course, which makes sense, and I wouldn't do that anyway. You know, I don't do a lot of that as it is. But I think as long as you separate that, I don't have a personal problem with that. But if the Ohio legislature said that that should be changed, then they should change it.
I do believe we should. You know, Supreme Court justices clear back to Tom Moyer have stated that they believe that it's important for us to eliminate part-time judges, and I agree with that concept. It does become difficult, and I've learned this from being on the bench, to manage your private practice and manage the court. Oftentimes you'll have a lawyer that comes before you on Thursday, and you're the judge and he's the lawyer, and then on Friday you're up against each other in a different court. And so I think to preserve the judiciary and that line of demarcation there, it would be wise to go ahead and start moving these part-time county court judges to full-time, even if that means we have to eliminate a couple of the positions. You know, the Supreme Court has set up rules and programs to become to have specialized docket in your court. Only being on the bench for 18 months, I haven't yet been able to explore that, especially with the COVID issue. But I am a firm believer in specialized dockets. I think the Supreme Court has laid out very nice guidelines that each court can use to set these up. But any judge really could run, you know, a specialized docket himself or herself by just looking at what programs are available and plugging defendants into those programs and then keeping an eye on them. So every judge can do it. It's great that the Supreme Court has given us guidance, and I would love to do that in my if I'm retained on the bench.
Yeah, this was a question that you know, I wanted to kind of get a little history on. I used to work for Judge Durkin when I was in law school. So I worked in the drug court, and I saw the effectiveness of drug courts. In the legislature, I fought for dollars for drug courts because I really believe that they work. You'd rather give somebody an opportunity to get better than to punish them and just put them down the road of, you know, we're going to have to pay for them for the rest of their life if we just keep punishing them, letting them out. They steal something, you throw them out. If it's all drug related, then deal with the underlying problem. And I think that makes the most sense. Plus, it's the most compassionate way to deal with it. With that being said, I wondered why 4 years ago these county courts kind of went away from these programs. And it was explained to me that in order to have certification with the Supreme Court, that you have to, if you want to be a specialized docket, you have to be able to hold a year of punishment over somebody's head. So like when Judge Durkin would make his findings, he would say, well, you're going to go to the state penitentiary for 3 years, or you're going to do drug court. Drug court's hard. You got to follow a lot of things. You got to change your life. It really changes you. If you're working in a misdemeanor court dealing with a misdemeanor drug offense, then the maximum you could give somebody is 6 months in prison. So yeah, you could stack them and you could do some different things, I'm sure, to be creative. But at the end of the day, I think that's why they can't get certified. And if you're not certified, then you can't get dollars and you can't get resources and you can't get that. It doesn't mean that you can't do it. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. It doesn't mean that we can't be creative in dealing with drug offenders, mental health, first-time OVIs. All that stuff I think we need to be creative in dealing with so that we could prevent that second one from occurring. But I think to answer your question, it's because a lot of the local courts can't get that certification because they don't have the stick. You could put the carrot there, but if you don't have the stick, then your drug court system, at least when you look at the numbers, it doesn't make sense. And that's what the Supreme Court said. But it doesn't mean that we can't be creative and do something.